Okay, we are now live.
Okay.
Right?
The third? Oh,
Not yet.
Oh, sorry. When did the 5 seconds start?
Now we're ready.
okay. The Thursday, June 25th, 2020, virtual regular meeting of the Brisbane Planning Commission will now come to order. This virtual meeting is compliant with the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20 issued on March 17, 2020, allowing for deviation of teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. Consistent with the order, this format provides a safe environment for staff, planning commissioners, and the public while allowing for open participation. The Planning Commission meeting is being broadcast on Comcast Channel 27 and the city's YouTube channel at youtube.com/BrisbaneCA. The agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org. All written comments submitted in advance of the meeting have already been provided to the Commission. For those who did not provide written comments, a call-in telephone number was provided on the agenda, which can be viewed online. The phone number and instructions will also be provided during the meeting. Staff, please call the roll.
Commissioner Gomez?
Here.
Commissioner Gooding?
He's muted.
Here. Commissioner Mackin?
Here.
Commissioner Patel?
Here.
Commissioner Sayasan?
Here. Adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I make the motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the motion passes with 5 ayes. Next is the consent calendar. If there is any member of the public who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar, please contact us in the next minute. Staff will post the text and call number on the screen.
So starting a 1-minute timer now.
While we're waiting, is there any commissioner who would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? Okay, I see no one.
We do have someone in the waiting room.
I think that might be my applicant, but you can let them in if you'd like to ask.
All right, I'm going to admit. Hello, you're in the meeting?
Hi, caller, you're in the meeting. Were you calling to comment on the consent calendar?
Yes.
Okay, you want to comment on the consent calendar?
Yes, this is Abraham? Or I mean, no.
Okay, sorry. I think this is the applicant.
All right, I'll put him back in the room.
We'll put you back in the waiting room. Okay.
1 minute has expired.
Okay. So, may I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
And a second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, staff, can you conduct the voice vote?
Commissioner Gomez?
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding?
Aye.
Commissioner Mackin?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Sayasan?
Aye. Okay, the motion passes with 5 ayes. Next is oral communications. This is wishes to address the Commission about an item that's not on tonight's agenda. If you would like to do so, please call or text within the next 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm starting a timer for 3 minutes now.
While we're waiting, I'll go to written communications. So we did receive 3 written communications concerning the subject of tonight's public hearing, 338 Kings Road. One is a letter from Chris Seppi Wood, the immediate neighbors of the subject property. Another is from Brisbane resident Glenn Fieldman, and a third is from resident Prem Lau. Staff, were there any other communications?
Through the chair, I was just told that there seems to be maybe a sound issue with our YouTube streaming.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry for this technical break-in. If our support staff would mind just double checking that. Is it okay if we don't have to take a break, but if we can just wait for me to hear from our staff? Okay. Okay, I'm hearing now the sound is okay. Sorry. Our sound seems to be good. So you just acknowledge written communications. Sorry to interrupt. And I haven't received any additional ones.
Okay, 1 minute warning. All right, time has expired and no one is in the waiting room.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll turn to our public hearing. It concerns grading review EX-4-19, 338 Kings Road. It's an R-1 residential district. And this is for reconsideration of grading review application for approximately 357 cubic yards of soil cut and export to accommodate a new driveway and additions, including a 2-car garage for an existing single-family dwelling. Abraham Zavala is the applicant. Wang John and Chen Joy Trust are the owners. Staff, may we have the presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair and Commission. So, just as some background, grading application for this property was previously considered by the Commission on February 27th. After closing the public hearing at that meeting, the Commission voted to deny the application. However, because no findings of denial were adopted, final action on the application was deferred to the next regular meeting. In the meantime, with the coronavirus shutting down our public meetings, your March and April meetings were canceled. In that interim time, the applicant wrote to the Commission asking for reconsideration of the application with revised plans. So on May 14th, the Commission considered and granted the applicant's request for reconsideration of the application with a revised project plan and scope. And that revised plan is before the Commission tonight. So the revised plans call for 357 cubic yards of soil cut and export from the site. This would accommodate the proposed 2-car garage, expanded driveway, and new access stairway to the main and accessory dwelling units proposed, the accessory dwelling unit proposed with the project. As a reminder, required materials to be submitted with a grading permit to the city engineer include geotechnical and soils reports, drainage and hydrology studies and plans, truck haul routes, and other technical information prepared and reviewed by licensed professionals, the applicant's consultants and the city engineer. So let's review quickly the changes to the project. So the revised project plans, which were attached to your staff report along with the old plans for your reference, show a reduction in the area of additions to the main dwelling. This specifically reduces the area of excavation at the ground level at the garage by about an area of 185 square feet. Also, because the scope of additions to the main dwelling has been reduced, compliance with current parking requirements is no longer required. So that eliminated the proposed on-street parking spaces and additional excavation in the public right-of-way. The proposed revisions also include changes to the driveway design. So previously, the plans proposed expanding the driveway to the west, which would directly conflict with one of the adjacent street trees, coast live oak trees. So that expansion has been eliminated. No expansion or grading in the western boundary of the existing driveway is proposed. All expansion would be to the opposite side and would not conflict with any street trees. There are no street trees on that location. The revised plans also proposed a slightly smaller curb cut, so 29-foot curb cut compared to the 33-foot curb cut previously proposed. Again, remember this is a driveway serving 2 properties, so it has to accommodate safe ingress and egress for cars serving both 334 Kings and the subject property at 338. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about the curb cut that's proposed. And finally, the revised grading plan, the engineer has added drainage information. This information is showing basically how the geotechnical engineer's recommendations will be implemented in the retaining wall designs and foundation design. So that would accommodate groundwater, as well as the applicant also provided a revised drainage plan showing the roof drainage, so how stormwater will also be collected and transferred into the city's storm drain system. And I also want to note that the city engineer has, of course, reviewed these revised plans. He's not identified any concerns with the capacity of the storm drain system to accommodate the proposed project, the runoff that would be associated with it. And then I'll note again that at the Commission's request, the applicant voluntarily provided a geotechnical report. This was attached to the staff report, as well as an updated letter from the geotechnical engineer of record, explaining basically the findings of the report, their applicability to the foundation and drainage design. And this is all based on the findings of the geotech report, which included borings on the site, characterization of the underlying geology of the site, and this geotechnical report, again, wasn't initially provided because it's not part of the typical materials that the Commission reviews, but it is required for a grading permit. It's something that the city engineer always requires and always reviews to ensure that the proposed plans conform with the recommendations of the geotechnical engineer. All right, so this is the existing site plan. So we can just quickly run through this. So this shows existing conditions. You'll see the driveway, which again, most of the existing driveway and proposed driveway would be in the public right-of-way. This is not unusual. The existing driveway currently serves only 334 Kings Road. So this is the approximate extent of the Kings Road right-of-way, which is 40 feet and is not paved to the full extent of its width. So here again is that driveway, and that is the approximate dimensions of the easement on the subject property that is intended to preserve unimpeded access for cars coming in and out of 334 Kings. So here's the revised site plan. So this shows the footprint of the proposed additions. It also shows the area of expansion of the driveway as well as the curb cut. So I have shown here again, the proposed driveway design would not change the existing western edge of the driveway. I have drawn a bit of a squiggly line in black. If you look at the screen, that is really just intended to show there's no changes there to that part of the driveway. Also highlighted again the proposed curb cut width. They will be required to widen Kings Road to 20 feet width of the travelway. That's something the city engineer will require due to the total scope of the project. But they're again no longer proposing any excavation in the right-of-way to accommodate on-site parking. So this is the revised grading plan showing the location and extent of the grading. It's also, again, as I noted, been revised to include drainage information, which is shown in the arrows showing how drainage will be moved off the site into the storm drain system. And here's an updated section showing the reduced footprint of excavation on the ground floor, and also illustrating how the proposed project will fit within the natural topography of the hillside. And again, just to orient us to the site, here's a view of the property. Here's a full view looking at the existing driveway, which is currently serving 334 Kings. Then I thought we'd also just look at the neighborhood for a little bit of context. So these are adjoining properties at 340 and 350 Kings. So I think this is a good example. You can see, again, with the hillside that we're looking at here, some of the retaining walls, and you can imagine the level of excavation required for a lot of the hillside development in this neighborhood. This is the adjacent properties of 334 and 326 Kings Road. So similarly showing, you can approximate what the existing natural slope of the property was prior to it being developed. Okay, so moving on to our findings and analysis. So as you're well aware, there are no findings in the municipal code for your review of grading permits. However, there were guidelines adopted in 2003 that do set general planning and design level guidelines for the commission to make their recommendations on. And I highlighted in the staff report, and I'll highlight it again here, that the guidelines do set out that while there is a threshold of 250 cubic yards for commission review, the fact that the project requires grading of that or more alone is not considered an adverse impact. A building alone can require that amount of grading just to be set into the hillside without significantly changing the surrounding topography. So just kind of setting the table with the full text of the guidelines. So moving on to the first guideline. So the required finding would be that the grading is minimized and designed to reflect or fit comfortably with the natural topography. So in this case, the revised project would meet this finding. The additions would be set within the hillside and would not alter the surrounding topography. The excavation is a minimum necessary to provide compliant on-site parking where none exists currently, in compliance with the design requirements in our municipal code. This would apply to both our driveway grade requirements as well as the minimum dimensions to accommodate covered parking in a garage. And finally, the driveway widening is the minimum necessary to provide unimpeded vehicular access for both properties that it would serve. The next guideline is that the proposed grading is designed to avoid large exposed retaining walls. So the proposed grading would result in one exposed retaining wall of about 8 feet in height within the front yard setback and extending partially into the public right-of-way. This is associated with the new access stairway. With the conditions of approval, the visual impact of this wall would be minimized. We would require either vegetative screening or use of varying materials to break up the massing of the wall. And again, retaining wall design in the right-of-way is subject to the city engineer's discretion, but of course we would highly suggest that he consider similar screening or treatment methods. The next finding and guideline relates to impacts to trees. So the proposed grading is designed to conserve existing street trees, any trees protected by species, and any trees that collectively would require a permit for removal under our tree ordinance. So as I indicated prior, the plans have been revised to eliminate the previously proposed expansion to the west. So no changes would be made to the existing driveway in the vicinity of those street trees, and the trees are no longer identified for removal on the applicant's plans. Out of an abundance of caution, the staff report discusses and the conditions of approval suggest that the city engineer consider requiring an arborist report just to confirm that the proposed grading would not have any long-term impacts on the health of those trees. Similarly, if the city engineer chooses to require that and there is found to be potential impacts in the long term to those trees, that he either require funds from the applicant to plant additional trees in the vicinity, or that replacement trees be incorporated into the project itself. But again, the revised project plans no longer conflict with the proposed tree. That condition is there out of caution. And the final finding does not relate to this project as it's not in the HCP area. And finally, as indicated by the chair, you all did receive written correspondence, which was forwarded to the commission prior to the meeting. And I'll close my presentation there and open up to commission questions and discussion.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have questions for staff? No one? Okay. Then I will open the public hearing.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Meckin.
Thank you. Julia, could you please just verify it looks like the parking space near the stairway was eliminated?
Yes.
Okay. And when you cite abundance of caution on an arborist, what is that abundance of caution triggered by?
I think anytime there's excavation occurring in the vicinity of street trees, even if, for example, they're no longer proposing actual expansion of the driveway into the location of the trunk. I think anytime that there is excavation or construction in the vicinity of mature trees like that, we would probably want to make doubly sure that their long-term health wouldn't be impacted.
Would this include heavy equipment removing all of this soil and having to back up where that tree is located?
That's a great example. Yeah.
Or the 4-inch perforated pipe that goes around the perimeter of the foundation and has to be trenched into the sewer line, which happens to be located between the two existing trees, which means that less than 10 feet from the quote subject tree, there will be a trench dug all the way to the street.
So I think part of the benefit of having the arborist report again is there are foundation designs that can actually avoid or significantly reduce conflict with adjacent tree roots. These are something that can be evaluated by the arborist to ensure not only are the trees physically protected during construction, but also that, potentially foundation designs can be revised and perfected to eliminate what could be impacts to tree roots. So again, we don't have indication from the applicant at this point that there's actual conflict with the tree, but we would want to make sure that, again, the whole scope of the project would not be significantly impacting their health long term.
Okay, and so let's be really clear. If the arborist deems that this is going to be problematic, then the tree goes. So I think it's disingenuous to characterize this as the tree removal has suddenly disappeared from this project. And I also did a little bit of to scale modeling with the garage provided to us on blueprints, and using the garage on the right side, which indicates a rather large vehicle. And when I made a model of this on paper, try backing out of that garage without hitting the tree and turning to get down the driveway. It almost seems completely impossible because you've got to have enough room to turn without hitting the sides of the garage. And if you miss the tree, I'm pretty certain it's by about 9 inches if you're lucky. So I think again, characterizing the tree is no longer in jeopardy is really not true. So that's my piece.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, if you want to, please raise your hand on Zoom. Oh, okay. Commissioner Gooding?
Yeah, is there a way, I noticed in the proposed findings and approval there was a suggestion that the city engineer consider retaining an arborist. Perhaps this can be addressed in a way that is more affirmative, that we have an arborist that is part of the process of getting from the permit to the work, so that the arborist can actually speak to any dangers to the tree during the course of construction. Is that feasible?
To have the condition of approval requiring an arborist to not only provide a report but to oversee construction?
No, well, not quite. What I was thinking is, as I read it, the proposed staff conditions on approval are to, I think, suggest to the city engineer that he consider retaining an arborist. And I was wondering if we couldn't possibly make that language more
mandatory.
More directory rather than advisory.
I would suggest, Commissioner Gooding, that if that's sort of a requirement of the commission to make that finding, that you can do that. That would be, if that's the basis upon which you would make the appropriate finding, that would be the basis to do that.
That's my inclination. That's my comment on the application so far, is that the arborist issue. It was gratifying to see that the modified application sort of took away taking out the tree, but to address Commissioner Mackin's concerns that as a practical matter, between the construction issues and the drainage issues and the use of the driveway issues continue to jeopardize that tree, that we make the arborist opinion or advice part of the conditions of the permit.
And I just, through the chair, this period should be for questions. I do want to note too, the applicant is in the waiting room and he may want to address the commission too.
Yeah, I think we can get through all this during the discussion phase, and because I'm sure there's a lot more comments that we're all going to want to make on this. But in terms of any follow-up questions, does anyone have any more for staff to clear up before Commissioner Mackin?
Julia, could you please clarify, how is it that what I, just roughly using the blueprints, estimate is about 1,300 square feet of public property is being turned over to this property owner for their private use? And who made that decision?
Are you referring to the existing driveway with the expansion?
There's more than the existing driveway that's involved.
Want me to pull up the site plan and we can look at it together? Would you like me to do that?
Sure.
Okay. Having an almost comical inability to put my thing on full screen, so we'll just look at it not on full screen. Okay. So, just bear with me here. Okay, so let's look at the site plan. So, here's the existing driveway, which, again, the majority of the existing driveway is within the public right-of-way. There's also a stairway serving the existing home. It's the only access stairway again, there's no vehicular access on this site, so the only way to get to the property is through the existing stairway, which is partially in the public right-of-way. Again, that's not uncommon in the city, especially for hillside properties like this, to have an extended stairway or access that extends into the public right-of-way. So, for example, looking at Tulare Street, The property, for example, 221 Tulare that you guys looked at a couple weeks ago, that was a good example too of the only access to that site with no vehicular access was an existing stairway that extended into the public right-of-way because the right-of-way is not fully improved. So here's the proposed site plan, which I realize it might be challenging to see this, but again, most of the existing driveway will be retained and expansion will be proposed on the left-hand side looking at the site plan. This is consistent with the existing development access on the site. So if it comes to an increase in square footage of space in the public right-of-way, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with their increasing access to the property. So the square footage of public right-of-way being used for access to these properties may be increasing, but it's consistent with how they're already being accessed today. And it also allows for safer, essentially a shared driveway for these two properties, using the existing condition that's there and expanding it so that it's safe. So that's kind of all I have to say about increasing use of the public right-of-way for accessing these properties.
Specifically decides whether a property owner can absorb public right-of-way.
The city engineer looks at use of the public right-of-way for private purpose. It's, again, when you have situations like we do in our hillside neighborhoods where the public right-of-way is not fully improved, there is actually a significant amount of right-of-way that people are using, whether it's through an encroachment permit or they're just enjoying the use of it without an encroachment permit. It's not an uncommon condition.
So anyone that wishes to improve their parking situation on the hill streets can ask to use public right-of-way and incorporate it into their property?
Almost every driveway in Brisbane, if it's on a street that's not fully improved, encroaches in the public right-of-way. And that's for someone to have driveway access, which we do require that development have parking on site, accessed by a driveway or a parking deck. Those facilities have to be accessed from the right-of-way. When you have a 40-foot right-of-way that's only improved to 28 feet, yes, that results in often facilities encroaching in the public right-of-way in order to provide that required access from the street.
So you're defining the access as the stairway and the driveway?
Yes.
And the area to the left of the stairway and landing?
That is not proposed to change. You might be seeing that there's a new concrete curb, which is required by the city engineer to accommodate a 20-foot clear travelway in the Kings Road right-of-way. It's currently not 20 feet clear because the project has the scope that it has. It's triggering a part of our building code that says when you're doing a certain size of project, you have to widen the street and make street improvements. And that is something that's in our code and that the city engineer is requiring in order to comply with that code.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, I see no questions. Okay, we'll open the public hearing.
Okay, let me admit the applicant.
Okay.
Okay, is this Abraham? You're in the public meeting. Jeremiah, if you wouldn't mind just confirming that they're in the meeting.
They're not yet, I'll admit.
Okay, thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, let's mute the YouTube video. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Mr. Zavala.
Yes. Good evening, commissioners.
Yes, hi, Mr. Zavala.
Oh, yes. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Abraham Zavala, and I'm the project engineer. Included in this call is Mr. John Huang, that is the property owner, and Mr. John Petrov, that is our soil engineer. Good evening. As you know, the project has been granted reconsideration for the proposed two-car garage and ADU. To make the project possible, we will have to excavate about 357 cubic yards of mostly hard sandstone, as noted on the borings that are part of the geotechnical report prepared for this project and that was provided to planning department as an additional information. In a way, the project is the same. However, we revised the original plans based on your feedback at the hearing on February 27th. We reduced the overall area by about 300 square feet to the main unit, and at the ground floor, this reduces the area of excavation by about 185 square feet. This reduction in area eliminates the requirement of having 2 additional parking spaces on the street. The main entry stairs were shifted east just enough to allow to widen the existing driveway to have a better exit to and from the houses of 338 and 334 Kings and into and from both directions of Kings Road. Overall, the driveway approach was reduced by 4 feet from the previous design. Along with all the plans provided to planning department, this time we have also submitted a preliminary drainage plan for behind the retaining walls and all the water that is collected at the roof of the existing house and the proposed addition. I think that I'm available for questions, but if you allow me, I would like to let our soil engineer describe in general the soil conditions of our project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abraham. Yes, I'm John Petroff. I'm the project geologist with Michelucci and Associates, and we've been involved with 338 Kings for several years now. And basically, to sort of expand upon what Abraham was saying, there really isn't much soil at the site. We did 3 test borings there, and one was at the rear, one was at the middle of the property, and one was along the front. And there was anywhere from 1 to 3 feet of soil, which was basically set atop either residual soil, which is basically weathered bedrock, or hard sandstone bedrock. So there really isn't much soil to speak of. Any excavation that's done will get into the hard sandstone bedrock that's underlying the site, which in my experience, having worked in Brisbane and along the flanks of San Bruno Mountain, is some of the hardest bedrock in the Franciscans, and it's very stable as well. So those are the soil conditions at the subject property.
Was there anything else you wanted to say, Mr. Petroff?
Well, again, if there's any questions or concerns, I'd be happy to try my best to address them.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have a question for Mr. Zavala or Mr. Petroff? Okay, no questions. I have one question, Mr. Petroff. Were you able, I don't know if you are familiar with the Woods, the next door neighbors. Are you aware of any of the concerns that they have? At least in their letter to us, they documented some erosion and issues and whatnot. Are you aware of that?
Actually, I have not been given anything directly related to a specific complaint by a neighbor. So in answer to your question, no.
Okay, but in your testing, you believe that most of what we're dealing with here is stable sandstone? Is that what you're saying? There's not much soil?
Yeah, there's not much soil overlying the sandstone. It's going to be mostly bedrock that will be cut into for the addition.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you, Mr. Petroff.
Okay, you're welcome.
Oh, was there a question?
Here.
Commissioner Gooding?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Petrov, are you aware generally of some history of slides a bit further along the street historically?
Am I aware of it? Yes, there have been shallow blowouts on the hillside. I can't specifically quote an address or anything, but it does happen.
Yeah, that's okay. My question is whether you have any opinion or information about whether the soil and bedrock conditions at the subject property are different, or how do they compare to the area where historical slides have occurred, so that the commission could get some understanding of whether this is less likely to slide, more likely to slide, once you start moving the soil around.
Generally speaking, our observations at the site were favorable. There was no areas of major or minor, for that matter, instability noted on the site. And we've been out there several times to do our work and to look at things, and over several years, and have not noticed any areas, that have developed over that time period. And again, the conditions there appear to be fairly favorable. I'll say very favorable.
But the reason I'm asking is because if there have been slides on that street in the past, it would be helpful to the commission, I think, to evaluate this grading permit application to understand as well as we can whether the specific conditions at this property are different in terms of more susceptible or less susceptible to sliding in the place where it slid not far from here. Can you offer us any advice about that?
Well, I think Kings Road is a fairly long and winding road, to my knowledge, and I'm sure there's been blowouts on, the street, somewhere along that street. Again, specifically where, I can't tell you, but it's not uncommon when you live on a hillside to have something like that happen. I think in regards to the project that's being looked at right now, the proposed project will really enhance the stability of the site itself. The construction of retaining walls, the installation of drainage behind those retaining walls, and whatnot will actually enhance stability and enhance the overall drainage conditions of the site. And again, I did not see any areas on the property itself that resembled a major or a minor sign of erosion or sliding having affected the property.
So assuming for the moment that it rains on that hillside after the proposed work has been done, is there more water? I'm trying to put this in layman's terms because that's all I got is my layman's understanding. Once the rain is occurring, is there more water sort of coming through the property down to the street or down to downhill properties, or less, or where does it go?
To say that I'm not a hydrologist. I can't say that there's more or less, but I can say that the water that does hit the hillside will either find the drainage or be absorbed in the soil on the hillside and take its normal course, I guess. But that's more of a question, I think, for a hydrologist than me. But I don't think it's going to introduce the possibility of a huge additional amount of water being filtered one way or the other down the slope. I think whether the water hits the hillside with a house or a house with an addition or a retaining wall, the same amount of water is going to hit that hillside. And with the proper drainage and the proper engineering, the water will find its way via a subdrain to the street and into the storm drain system eventually.
I saw somewhere in the application that either the engineer or the applicant themselves had consulted, I think, verbally or informally with a hydrologist. Were you part of those conversations at all?
No, I was not.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other commissioners have a question? Please use your Zoom raise hand so I can call on you. Okay, I see no one.
Commissioner Mackin does.
Oh, Commissioner Mackin. Okay.
Thank you. We had a letter from a resident which questioned that there were no figures pertaining to how much water would be handled by the 4-inch perforated perimeter pipe. Could you tell us how, if that was your recommendation, how you arrived at a 4-inch perforated pipe? And also the existing house, does it have gutters? It looks like there are roof drainage figures for 2-inch pipes and 3-inch pipes, but nothing clear about whether that's going into the 4-inch pipe.
There will be a separate 4-inch pipe system, a solid pipe system connected to the downspouts, which could be routed in the same trench as the foundation drain. The foundation drain will consist of a 4-inch perforated pipe, will be extended along the upslope side of all the retaining walls that are done. So you've got essentially two systems going here. You've got the solid pipe system servicing the downspouts, and if any area drains are done around the perimeter of the building because it's deemed necessary, you can probably pipe that into the solid piping system. And the perforated pipe will handle the subdrain water, which is water that would come in below the ground surface. So in essence, you've got two active drainages going on, and they can all be sort of put together in the same trench system. And eventually, water will be routed around the addition, around the house, and to an outlet where it discharges into the storm drain system at the street.
I think the question being posed by the resident in their correspondence is how you arrived at a 4-inch perforated pipe, and I believe their question is raising the idea of, was there a calculation about the volume of water that would handle, in that on the C3 and C2 there's actually some calculations done for the drains off of the roof on the volume of water, but there was nothing to substantiate whether a 4-inch perforated pipe would handle the flow coming down from that hillside.
Well, this is Abraham Zabala, and I prepared those preliminary calculations for all the water that will hit the roof and the deck. And those calculations are based on a 60-minute, 100-year return from tables from the code. For the retaining walls, what we are proposing right now or showing on the plans is the preliminary drainage system without, and right now using something that is very difficult to use, behind retaining walls, a 4-inch perforated pipe. But like I said, the numbers and the calculations that you see on page C3 are for all the precipitation that is coming to the roof, and from the roof down to the drainage system. As Mr. Petrov indicated, there are two different systems: one to carry down the water from the roofs and decks, and the other one to carry the water that is only for the retaining walls. At some point, they will get together into a solid pipe and direct it to the storm drain system. It's in our best interest also to be sure that we don't have water into the house. It's not like we don't want to see, we have to see this from two different ways. One, we need to be sure that the new construction it's okay, and we don't have any intrusion of water, or we have eventually mold or something like that. That's why it's very important also for us to have a good drainage system behind the house. The existing drainage system on the existing house, it has to be improved as well, because right now the existing downspouts, they just drain free into the ground and into the foundation. Everything will be tight, not just the new structure, but also the existing structure will improve the drainage.
Okay, I appreciate your response. I don't think I'm getting the answer that this person is looking for, because they want to know how you arrived at a 4-inch perforated pipe and what type of load that will handle, and there are no calculations provided.
Well, what I'm saying is that right now, in terms of the retaining walls, we show something that is typical for this type of retaining walls, a 4-inch perforated pipe. If we need to do something more that is required of engineering on that part, we will do it.
I'd like to interject something here, if I may. The key player in a subdrain isn't really the pipe, actually. It's the trench itself. The trench has to be pitched to direct water. The pipe is there to act as a guide, as a helper. An area where it's clear of gravel and whatnot, and water will be allowed to enter and flow out freely. The pipe really isn't the key player. It's the trench itself that really directs the water, because oftentimes the water, you have a bed of gravel beneath the pipe. Water may not even find the pipe. It may stay in the gravel and gradually make its way out via the trench.
Okay. So I have one more question. There's in the February 27, 2018 Geotechnical Report, there was a comment that the existing foundation has been affected by excessive settlement, and that portions or all of the residents should be underpinned or replaced, and also supported in bedrock. Is this being addressed?
Not yet. We have not addressed that part, because in order to for us to move up to that point, we will have to. We will have to continue with the project, and at some point, the entire house will be all the structure in the house will be addressed at the same time as we do all the structural portion for the new structure.
I understand that, but in this same geotechnical report, there's a lot of very strong assertions that any grading done for an addition needs to take into account the effect on the existing structure, including there's admonitions in here that the geotechnical firm needs to be on site to at all times inspect what's going on, to look for fractures. It sounded pretty serious.
It's not serious. It is typical when you do construction to an adjacent structure that you have to take care. For example, in San Francisco, that the houses are attached one to each other. Anytime that you do foundation on property line, if you go deeper, either you have to you likely have to underpin the foundation of the adjacent property, and then you do yours. In this case, only one side is the one that is affected, and at the time, right now, I don't know if we can underpin that section, or we can usually design a brand new foundation that is going to serve for the existing and new structure, but it's only one side.
So what has caused what's described in this report as existing residence is 4 inches out of level, suggesting greater than normal foundation settlement?
Well, the house of this age is not very uncommon that they have problems with the foundation, because in most cases they may be undersized, or the code at the time allowed to do something less without maybe not a soil report at the time and just build a house. But this is not uncommon with houses that are 40, 50, 60 years old or older.
So what caused?
And this is the case of this house.
What caused the settlement with this house?
John, do you want to answer that?
I could try, sure. I mean, I agree with what you said, Abraham. The house is old, and they constructed foundations to a different standard. Nowadays, the engineering is so much more sophisticated and so much better, and we have such a better understanding of how to prevent these types of settlement issues that when the house, I guess, was originally constructed, essentially they probably just embedded the foundation a certain depth into the ground without little or much concern about the material it was actually embedded in. And the survey that we did shows that along the front of the house there has been some settlement, and there is a little bit of fill along the front of the house. And the foundation, I believe, only extended about less than a foot deep along the front of the house, so it wasn't embedded deep enough to touch the sandstone that's in that hillside, and would provide the needed stability.
So
I'm not sure if it's clear.
Okay, I'm quoting from this report. It also says it may be necessary to shore portions of the existing residence to protect the structure from movement when the garage excavation is made.
Yeah, these are all pretty standard recommendations, I would say. You always want to be cautious, and sometimes it comes down to making a field decision when the construction's going on. We would be out there at the time that these excavations were being made, and we could look at the bedding planes if there are any exposed, and we can determine if there is favorable conditions, less favorable conditions, whether shoring would be necessary and should be done to protect a certain area of the slope if those adverse conditions are exposed. And it's you have to sort of look at what's there and make a determination sometimes, and sometimes that determination occurs past the point of actually having done a soil report or preparing plans. It happens in the field, and if we're on site, we should be able to consult with the engineers on a regular basis and the contractor out there and determine whether or not some of these things would need to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, I see no one. Okay, thank you, Mr. Zavala, Mr. Petrov.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
We're gonna mute you, but we'll leave you in the meeting in case there's any
Okay. Okay, now we'll take any comments from members of the public.
There is one person waiting, I will admit. One person waiting, I will admit. Hello, you are connected.
Hi, thank
Hi.
you. Hi, it's Michelle Salmon. Let me just mute my computer so you don't get feedback.
You are connected.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Hi, it's Michelle Salmon. Let me just mute my computer so you don't get feedback. Okay. Can you hear me? I don't think I can mute the computer, so I'm just going to move away from the computer. So I have several concerns. And sorry for the delay, but I'm just going to go in another room so I can't hear the computer, so I won't be able to hear what you're saying, but I'm going to go ahead and say what I want to say. I have concerns, first of all, about the trees. Damaging the roots or excavating near the roots will definitely damage the trees. On the corner of San Bruno Avenue and Santa Clara Street, many years ago, it was a condition of approval that those trees there be saved. And so they did, even though they damaged the trees by trimming the roots to build the house. And now those trees are slated to be taken down after a very few short years, and those trees have lived there for a long time. So it looks like we'll have the same problem here, even though these are not pine trees, but when the roots get cut or disturbed like that, it is hard. And as the fellow said, it's a very shallow soil structure. It's like 1 to 3 feet. The top of the mountain has a very shallow soil structure, and the soil that is there is a clay lattice underlaid by sandstone, and it is a very friable sandstone in many places, and it does fracture, and you can see that throughout various sites along Kings Road. To me, it's not a stable land mass at all. Yes, there's hard rock under there, but there's also rock crumbles, especially after it's been exposed to water. And you can look at that further down the road, an example of that where the whole hillside is crumbling when they remove plants. So that's a problem. At the last council meeting, they passed the budget for, I don't know how much money, but I'm sure John and Stuart could tell you exactly, for Brisbane's stormwater drainage system. And that cost is going to continue to escalate as long as we continue to funnel all the natural water into the storm drain system. And this is another classic example of us doing that. Not only would we be increasing the roof size of the structure, which will increase the amount of water that's diverted into storm drain instead of being able to be soaked up in the 1 to 3 feet and evaporate eventually or be used by plants, it'll go into the storm drain system. So those costs are just going to continue to escalate as long as we continue to do this practice. I think there's grave concerns for this house that they are not going to actively correct the problems with the current foundation and the settlement of 4 inches before they do the excavation and adding on to the property. I think that's kind of egregious, but this is a flip. To me, it's obvious these people are going to flip and leave, and so yet again, the next owner will be stuck and the city of Brisbane will be stuck. And early on you talked about, that there would be, and if something happened to the trees that they would replace them. Well, the applicant is going to be long gone, and the current owner is probably also going to be long gone. And I've seen this happen time and time again where we make modifications, make adjustments, allow things to happen, and then there's no follow-through. There's no mechanism for following through to make sure this tree got planted or that foundation got fixed or this thing happened. And this is another classic case where we're setting ourselves up for failure by not dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And I really have to compliment our planning commission on the amount of work that they have put into this, the astuteness of the questions that they're asking, drilling down into the problems, because there are 2 major forces that are some of the strongest forces in the world, and it's gravity and water. And both of these are coming extremely into play in this situation. And so, Colleen, you were absolutely right to ask questions about the size of the drain pipe. Where's all that water going to go? It's going to go downhill. And we've seen what's happened. There's been landslides. I mean, the water funneling down from Kings through Humboldt is what caused the landslide on Humboldt that ended up on Sierra Point several years ago during a heavy, heavy year. It's a reality. The hydrologist should be there. The engineers should be there. This really needs to be nailed down. You can't do it on the fly. You have to. This is a private residence, so you're not going to have somebody like testing engineers going out there and looking at it the way they do with a large construction, an independent testing engineer. And we don't really have a good track record with building inspections. So I think that there's a lot of issues here, and you're really smart to lock them all down before you give approval and expectation of being able to do this major excavation in addition to the house with an unstable foundation already in place. So that's about all I have to say. So I'm now walking back to my computer so I can hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Do we have anyone else, Jeremiah?
Yes, we do. We have one more caller. I'll go ahead and Good evening. Please mute your computer or television.
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, is this Mr. Lau?
It is.
Okay, please state your comment.
Okay. Hi, this is Frame Lau, Brisbane resident, and so I am and so I listened to all of the comments from Mr. Zavala and Mr. Petrov, and I'm very, very concerned about what they had to say, because it sounds to me like they're planning to do all of this on the fly. All of their comments indicate essentially that we don't really know what's going to happen, but we're just going to figure it out, and while we're doing the job, if something happens, then we're going to deal with it. That's no way to plan a project. And I'd like to add to what Michelle said about water and gravity and the forces that are acting on this property and all of the surrounding properties. And that is that if they just do this on the fly like they're proposing and then flip the house and the current owner is gone and the subsequent owner is left with the problems, it's not just going to be the subsequent owner, it's going to be everybody who's downslope, including the property at 339 Kings, the property at 333 Kings, the property at 760 Humboldt, the property at 740 Humboldt, and all these properties that are nearby, 764 Humboldt and 738 Humboldt. All of us will have to deal with the after effects of this project, and these guys don't even seem to know what the hell they're doing. So that's pretty much what I have to say. And if I sound a little bit annoyed, well, that's the way that's true. That's what I am. I'm annoyed by this project because, and as you mentioned, Colleen, the 4-inch pipe. Where does that come from? How much water can that hold, and how are they going to prevent that from becoming blocked by soil when it's 5, 6, 7 feet underground? What are they going to do? Once that becomes clogged with dirt, then what happens? Where does all that water go? Nowhere. And then it flows down the mountainside, and then I have to deal with it. So that's pretty much what I have to say. So I'm going to allow anybody else who wants to talk now.
Thank you, Mr. Lau.
All right.
Do we have any other speakers, Jeremiah?
There are no other people in the waiting room.
Okay. Do you want to just give them 30 more seconds and then we'll close the public hearing, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Through the chair, I do see someone in the waiting room. Jeremiah, was that someone that we put in there just to wait?
That was Michelle.
That's Michelle? Okay.
And our 30 seconds has expired.
Okay, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Okay, staff, can you take the voice vote?
Commissioner Gomez?
Aye.
Gooding? Commissioner Gooding?
He's muted.
Aye.
Commissioner Mackin?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Saison? Commissioner Saison?
Oh, yeah, aye. Okay, so that's 5 ayes. So let's discuss this. Anyone want to start? How about you, Commissioner Mackin?
Oh, why me?
You seem to have a lot of questions on this, so let's start with you.
Yes, I have lots of questions and I'm not getting answers. The fact that it's necessary to put a caveat about the tree, I think the fate of the tree is pretty clear. I still don't think they're going to be able to get out of the garage and miss the tree. I don't think the tree's going to survive trenching, grading, and everything else going on. So that's pretty much what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball, but if I'm a betting person, it's pretty clear. By admission, with the geology report, I'm not very confident about the existing house, and then we're going to start removing all of this dirt next to it. I think there's more questions than answers, and the fact that there were 2 hydrologists contacted who said not necessary. Why don't we see a letter from those hydrologists? We're taking the word of someone that it's not necessary. It's a good sized hillside. If it's going to affect property, it might not only affect this owner's property, but the one adjacent to the right. And I think when you have someone who wishes to make major improvements, you have to ask yourself whether the goals or wants of an individual take precedence over the well-being of a lot of other property owners. And I honestly don't feel that this is safe. It's not been demonstrated to me that it's going to be safe. And absent that kind of assurances that I want to see, I'm inclined to say no. You've got to show us that you've done more due diligence here. Because if I'm living downhill from this, or I'm the neighbor next door, I'd be pretty upset by verbal platitudes that, well, it's okay and looks kind of okay, and we'll deal with the main house later, and yeah, there will be slides in the area, but it looks okay. When the house was built, and a lot of those homes were built decades ago, maybe some of them shouldn't have been built where they were, but we know better. So do we want to do the same thing again? I don't want to be responsible for that. That's my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Gooding?
Through the chair, if I could interrupt. I got a text that I believe it was Ms. Salmon wanted to speak again before the public hearing closed, but it appears that she has changed her mind. So is she still in the waiting room, Jeremiah, or is there anybody in the waiting room? And it's up to the commission whether you want to reopen again with the technology and the lags and whatnot. It's the chair and the commission's choice.
Yes, Michelle is still in the waiting room.
I mean, if she would like to speak, sure, we'll hear from her.
Hello, Michelle, can you hear us?
She's muted.
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just not fast keying everything at the same time. What I wanted to say is please make sure that anything that you approve is locked down tight. I don't think that they have done their due diligence, as Colleen said. There's been too many instances where the owner and the applicant have walked away afterwards and left everyone else hanging. And this is half-baked. And if you're going to do this kind of project, it needs to be really, really locked down. And the other thing I wanted to say is that 9-inch clearance for the tree to get out of the driveway. And what happens when the tree grows, should it survive this project? So I really do urge caution. I mean, I know the applicant's probably in a big hurry to get this done so he can move on. But this really will affect a lot of people downhill for a long, long time. So That's all I really wanted to say, and it was very frustrating raising my hand in my dining room, not being able to be seen. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's resume our discussions. I'll go to you, Commissioner Gooding. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, thank you. So now's my time to re-raise the issue that I probably raised at the wrong point in the process earlier, which is whether or not it's feasible to require an arborist to weigh in on the health of the tree as the building process actually begins, or wherever it's appropriate. And that's probably a question to staff. At present, the recommendations were to suggest to the engineer that he consider doing this or that, which seems like sort of two levels of discretion. And I think the commission, or at least a couple of the commissioners, seem pretty concerned about the viability of this tree through the life of the building project and thereafter.
Yeah, so staff, is there a way, I mean, are we able to put that type of strong conditions where, let's say the arbor says, if they go through with this project, the trees will be damaged? And is there any way that her findings, her conclusion could stop the construction, can stop the project in its tracks, or can we not? I mean, once we approve it, to go forward?
Well, I guess the normal sequence would be that an arborist report would be required prior to the permit being issued. It would make some opinion as to the impacts on the tree in question based on the plans. Again, there are provisions in the city's ordinance that allow for replacement of street trees. And so that's, normally the upshot is if a tree is going to be damaged, if there's some question about that, it's typically a replacement conclusion. That's typically the action taken. It's not to basically prohibit the project from proceeding. That's the typical outcome.
But it seems like some of the concerns we have is we don't want to lose these big, beautiful trees, one. And two, we feel as though they're adding to the stability of the area. So replacement trees aren't going to solve that. So you're saying that the arborist would come in early on in the permit stage, right? So if she makes a determination that these trees will likely be damaged, it's not like, the applicant has invested too much into it at that stage.
Well, I mean, that's for the applicant, it's earlier. It's not, the project's not midway through construction and they're not being brought to a halt. But typically that is the city engineer in the street trees. Those tend to fall within his purview, and the outcome and the, what is the way to can it be mitigated? Can it not be mitigated? What are the options? And, sitting here right now, I can't tell you what the outcome would be with certainty. That if the arborist report says there's a possibility that this tree could be damaged, I don't know what the city engineer would do with that information in terms of a final determination. Yeah,
so I'm trying to pinpoint what authority do we have to require action? Because do we use our authority now, or do we lose it? And then it's up to the city engineer to make that determination. I just want to know, how far can our authority extend? So you're saying if we were to approve it, that's it, we have no further say-so. We can't put a condition into place.
Can you put a condition that the project cannot proceed if a street tree if the arborist report indicates the tree is subject to some risk? I mean, what are you exactly trying to accomplish? What is your goal here? I want some degree of certainty that they feel that the tree will not be damaged. The trees will not be damaged.
if we allow this proceed. I mean, I don't know if an arborist can put some type of percentage, if she can predict, well, I'm gauging 90% they'll be safe, 75%, I just want some type of, I don't know if we can put conditions in there. If the arborist is 90% sure the trees will be safe, then okay, they can proceed. So you're by the look in your face, you're saying no. So it's pretty much.
It's just an awkward. There's no certainty here, right? I can't tell you with absolute certainty. Again, there's just no real happy answer that I can tell you that will leave you with an absolute sense of certainty that your wishes will come true. What we would typically want to do would require the arborist report be done. It would hopefully provide recommended mitigations or measures that should be taken during construction to reduce damage or reduce the likelihood of any damage occurring to that tree, and proceed along that sort of path. That's very common course of event.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have questions? Commissioner Gomez, anything?
I don't have any questions. I think we've raised really valid concerns, whether around the concerns around the tree or the drainage. I think we have raised a large amount of evidence that shows that the risks associated with this project are pretty significant, and we haven't found the answers that I think we're looking for. That's about all I have to say.
Through the chair, could I respond to one point being made here?
Sure.
There's been a lot of discussion about hydrology and geotechnical. I would like to remind the commission that those areas are under the purview of a licensed engineer, someone licensed by the state of California. I would be very cautious about a group of lay people making assertions as to safety of design, impacts of projects, when frankly no one on this board has the professional certification to make those kind of assertions.
Okay. Thank you, John. Commissioner Gooding?
Yeah, and that's exactly, and thank you, John, for saying that, because that's been the point I was trying to make, which is we don't have, and this is perhaps what Napala was kind of intimating, is that we don't have some answers. I personally don't feel like we have enough technical advice and weighing in on this for us to make an intelligent decision. I'm not about to make a hydrological decision or a geotechnical decision or an engineering decision, but I have a concern that we don't have that information. So one suggestion I have is, if we don't have an arborist decision yet, I'm not thoroughly comfortable with trying to put sort of conditions on how definitive this opinion by an arborist would be enough or not enough. And I would prefer to have that and perhaps even a hydrologist's opinion on the front end rather than on the back end. I think that's, this is a very steep hillside. There have been slides in the neighborhood before. Even though the applicant did sort of, the new application seeks to remove the tree as an issue, I don't think it is removed as an issue as a practical matter. So on those several bases, I just don't think we have the information that we need yet to make an intelligent decision.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Patel?
I have no more comments, really. I would just echo what everyone else has said before. I'm pretty much ready to make a motion.
Okay. I just want to ask John one follow-up question to what Commissioner Gooding was saying. So I think we kind of addressed this before when we initially wanted a hydrology report, and I think you had suggested something that would be voluntary, that's not something normally that we would have at this stage. So if we wanted, to hear from the arborist, or we wanted to hear from more experts, is that what you told us before, that that's not something that we normally would have in front of us when we're deciding something like this?
That is correct, especially things like geotechnical, hydrology, because frankly, those are not into the commission's purview. At the end of the day, you can look at a hydrology report, but there's no legal basis or basis in state law or any kind of licensing for you to opine based on that report. That's really the job of the city engineer. It's not your job to opine on the validity, conclusions, accuracy of those kind of documents. So they can be provided for information, but that's really all they are.
Okay, any other comments?
Commissioner
Gooding?
Yeah, so John, if this commission this commission as a whole doesn't feel like we have enough information to make a decision as to whether this project adequately addresses safety concerns and ecological concerns, are you telling us that we don't have the right to ask for more information?
I would respectfully submit, if you look at the findings that you're charged with making, that the issue of safety is not your purview, that is the city engineer's purview. I don't see anything in those findings that you're making that relate to the safety of a grading plan, or the inherent safety of a construction project. I don't get there from looking at the findings and how that is relative to your purview.
I think one aspect of our just
I
want
was
to follow up on that.
The chair, if the findings that are made, whether it's for recommending approval or denial, they have to be based on the guidelines that are before you. So I would just caution everyone before a motion is made, whatever that motion is, to, as John said, to keep it within the findings that you are asked to operate within.
Okay, so one of the things that we're charged with looking at is, does the proposed grading, is it designed to conserve the existing street trees? Now, if we were to then make a finding that we don't think the grading is designed to conserve those trees, then that would be a legitimate finding, correct?
Correct.
And that's been some of the concerns that we've been voicing, right? And we don't think, even if the plan, their design doesn't call for the removal of the trees, it suggests risk to those trees, if they were to go through with the project. Commissioner Mackin?
When the chair talked to John about what happens if there's an arborist report, if the arborist says there's a very, very likely chance the tree will not survive all that will take place in proximity. The simple answer I think that you were looking for, Madam Chair, is that doesn't mean the project doesn't go on. It means just that the tree is removed. There is absolutely nothing that would stop the project to protect the tree. Either the tree survives or the tree is removed. Those are your choices. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
There is no other alternative here. So if you're trying to rule on the basis of we have a concern about the longevity of the trees, then you have to rule on that basis. You can't rely on an arborist report, because either the arborist will say, I don't know, then the tree dies. And if he says that it's going to die, then the tree is automatically removed. But the project goes on either way. The only way the project doesn't go on is if you say this potential tree damage, death, whatever you want to call it, termination, is something that is not in keeping with the general plan for the neighborhood. And let's not forget, it is on public property, not private property.
Okay. Anybody else have any more comments? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
Well, also, can I also, through the chair, should the motion be not what staff is recommending, remember that you have to craft findings and you have to give us direction as to what those findings are so that we can have the record reflect those findings, that there's not just a motion and a vote.
Okay. Is anyone prepared to make a motion with that in mind? No motion?
So I'll make a motion.
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Mackin can make the motion if she wants.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Okay. So my motion would be to deny the permit because I believe that this project will not preserve street trees on public land as they are currently situated, which is like there's an old growth oak tree of that size growing on public land that would not survive this particular project, and the replacement would not be an appropriate solution to completing this project.
okay. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay. Let's conduct a voice vote.
Oh, through the chair,
Yes.
with the one of the commissioners, I believe it was Commissioner Mackin, had made some other observations regarding the tree and its proximity to the edge of the driveway. Did you want to incorporate that into your findings or not, Commissioner Patel?
Yes, I would like to incorporate all of those comments.
And that would be the proximity of the tree to cars entering and exiting the garage? Just so I make sure I'm clear on that.
That's
Yes.
what I understood the comment to be.
Yes.
And I think, just to try to be helpful here, I think also our comments would be, our findings might include that the progress of the construction itself with the piping and the connection to the sewer would also potentially endanger the tree.
I think we need to include the fact that there would be concerns about potential erosion, that the trees are intrinsic in preventing erosion on the hillside.
Okay. So we have all that? Okay, let's conduct a voice vote on the motion with all the other additions.
Commissioner Gomez?
I support the motion.
Commissioner Gooding?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Mackin?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Sayasan?
Aye. The motion passes. The project, where the motion passes, yes, with 5 ayes, the project is denied. I will read the appeal procedures. Anyone may appeal the action of the Planning Commission to the City Council, except where specified otherwise. Appeal shall be filed with the City Clerk not later than 15 calendar days following the Planning Commission's decision. Exceptions to the 15-day filing period include the following. Appeal shall be filed with the City Clerk within 6 calendar days of the Commission's action for use of permits and variances, and 10 calendar days for tentative maps and advertising sign applications. Okay, next is items initiated by staff. staff, are there any items?
Oh, just two things. The city council last week, they continued the ADU zoning code amendment that the commission had approved, I think in May or April, I guess May. That got continued to the fall. And then the other thing that the council spent quite a bit of time on was the short-term rental ordinance. And they did go ahead and approve it substantially as the commission recommended. One of the changes that the commission had talked about at length, but the council changed it in the ultimate decision, was to prohibit long-term renters from operating short-term rentals. So it's owner-occupied only, is what the council landed on. Julie, I don't think there were any other substantive changes. That's the one that sticks in my mind.
Correct, and we put up a summary of those changes on the city's website on our up-to-date short-term rentals page.
Oh, and the other thing the council did, they adopted that ordinance on an emergency basis or urgency basis. So it actually took effect immediately upon action. And there's a sort of 90-day, I think, window of opportunity for people to who might be operating now to obtain a permit.
Yeah, but unhosted rentals are, as of that date, not permitted. The 90-day grace period does not apply.
Okay.
So that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Items initiated by commission. Anything from the commissioners? Okay, none. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn to our next meeting of July 9th, 2020?
Oh.
Second?
Second.
Okay, can we have the voice vote?
Commissioner Gomez?
Aye.
Gooding?
Aye.
Mackin?
Aye.
Patel?
Aye.
Shiasan?
Aye. 5 ayes, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.